So as we gather here today, the world faces ever-increasing challenges that demand thoughtful and strategic responses. Our esteemed panel of experts in this session will delve into the intricate landscape of humanitarian crisis planning, exploring collaborative approaches across sectors to ensure effective preparedness, swift response, and compassionate recovery efforts. It's a great pleasure to invite our distinguished panel on the podium. Chairing this session is Shri Anil Kumar Sinha ji, a veteran of laying the foundation of disaster management in India. He's a dedicated professional with an experience of several years in public service. Shri Sinha has expertise in disaster risk reduction and climate change with mainstreaming public policy analysis in India. He is the founder, vice chairman of Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, Patna, Government of Bihar, and established the ethos of the organization, lending it its vision, goals, and leadership. As Joint Secretary in charge of disaster management in Government of India, and as the first responder to some of the most devastating disasters in recent Indian history, such as the Bhuj Earthquake in 2001 and Super Cyclone 1999, he provided the necessary leadership and management. He was a member secretary of the high-powered Committee on Disaster Management, set up at the behest of the then Prime Minister Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. Earlier, he founded the National Institute of Disaster Management, Government of India, at the national level, and at the International Recovery Platform, UNDP, in Kobe, Japan, at the global level. In recognition of his exemplary services, he was handed over the key of the city of Kobe by the governor of Japan, and he has several publications to his name, and we welcome him to chair this session, Shri Anil Kumar Sinha ji. Welcome, sir. Let me also have the pleasure of introducing the rest of the panel. We have Shri Sanjay Sharma, Deputy Director, Bal Raksha Bharat. He is a seasoned professional with over 23 years of progressive leadership experience in managing large-scale development programs, strategic partnerships, operations management, and resource mobilization at the senior management levels. Shri Sanjay's expertise extends to leading international partnerships, inter-agency networks, program management, donor relationships, and collaborating with private sector and national coalitions. Currently serving as the Deputy Director, Program and Partnerships at Bal Raksha Bharat. Welcome, Mr. Sanjay Sharma. We will be also joined by Dr. Ranjit Kumar Sinha, IAS, of the Uttarakhand cadre. He has held various portfolios at the state and central levels. He has served as Chief Development Officer in 2 districts, Udham Singh Nagar and Chamoli, and as Collector and District Magistrate in 3 districts, Chamoli, Tehri Garhwal, and Pithoragarh. Dr. Ranjit Kumar Sinha, please, to join us. And last but not the least, we have Mr. Alf Ivar Blikberg joining us in this panel. Mr. Alf is a Program Management Officer with the Global Education and Training Institute of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction in Incheon, Republic of Korea, where he supports training activities at the national level. Before taking this position, Mr. Blikberg worked as the Section Chief for Asia and the Pacific in the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs based in New York, where he oversaw emergency operations across the Asia-Pacific region. Previously, he also managed a multi-donor trust fund supporting projects in early warning, disaster, and climate preparedness at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok, Thailand. With over 20 years of experience, Mr. Blikberg has worked with international organizations, including the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations. Mr. Alf Blikberg to join us on stage, please. Over to Shri Anil Kumar Sinha ji, our chair of the session.
Hello, Mr. We haven't met, meeting for the first time. Yeah. I thought this. Yeah, namaste and good evening to everyone. It's getting a bit late in the evening, but I'm really happy that even at this hour we have a sizable presence. Let me first of all acknowledge the presence of Mr. R.K. Sinha, Namaskar, former member, Rajya Sabha, and a visionary and a leader in true sense. I think way back, when we were joining the civil services, IAS, you see, and his brother, of course, he is no more, he was my batchmate. Ravinderji was thinking of decades ahead, you see, you know, and therefore today what we have is dream come true, the IISSM, and I'm really amazed to see that it is the 33rd annual global, conclave which is being held. So thank you, Sinha Sahab. It's wonderful you have taken an initiative, you got into an area of security where no one in the country was literally thinking about it, you see. So you are a true leader in that sense, you say. And I'm very happy that, even though it is late in the evening, but you have taken the trouble. Of course, you have a keen interest, you have the passion, and you have the commitment. So you are here with all of us. Thank you so much. I'm thankful to IASSM for having invited me for this session. I think this is very, very important, and we'll talk about that. And I'm very happy that we have a panel of one of the most eminent personalities, experts. I have Ranjit, my colleague from UP. Uttarakhand, yeah. I think I just missed going to your place, Somehow or the other there was a mix-up. And then we have Sanjay Sharma ji, who is working in a very critical area of children, Bal Raksha Bharat. I was very happy to see this version of Save the Children. I've known Save the Children for maybe decades, but Bal Raksha and in Bharat, for the first time. I'm told that, this was adopted earlier. Maybe I missed it, And we have Alf, Blikberg, is that the way you? Okay, Blikberg, Thank you. Thank you for joining. I see that you have a long experience with the international and UN system, Now, the topic which we have today, right now, is planning for humanitarian crisis, planning, early warning, response, relief, preparedness, recovery, and knowledge management. It's a wide sweep, And of course, humanitarian crisis, if you're talking humanitarian crisis, that also presents a big canvas, wide sweep, So before I come to the panel members, let me just make a few remarks, share my thoughts on this, When we talk of humanitarian crisis, I saw in the program today, and some speakers also in the earlier session, talking about understanding risk, Understanding risk, if I may also share my understanding of understanding risk, is something very critical. Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which came out of the third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, held in in Japan. Two earlier ones were also held in Japan, The first was in 1994, the second was in 2005, first in Yokohama, near Tokyo, second in Kobe, in Hyogo Prefecture, in which I was involved on behalf of the government of Japan, and then third one in the city of Sendai, you see. There's been a big evolution of global campaign, campaign by the United Nations at the global level. If we see from 1989-90, when they started the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, and then the first World Conference in Yokohama, 1994, which was a mid-term review, second in 2005, when a review of what had happened in terms of, the first was International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction. But in 2005, it was discovered that while a lot of work had been done across the countries, across the world, we had moved from post-disaster relief to pre-disaster preparedness, planning, etc., etc. That kind of a paradigm was changing, in that decade. But the instances and the numbers of natural disasters had not really gone down, And so 2005, further Hyogo framework for action came, and then the Sendai framework came. Sendai framework marks, another paradigm change where man-made disasters, chemical disasters, technological disasters, they have also been included. And another fundamental difference there was that 4 priorities were agreed upon by the almost 200 nations across the globe, and seven targets, I thought, isn't it? Yeah. Now, one of the first priority of Sendai framework said understanding risk. Now, one thing which I realized way back in my younger days was that, we are talking of humanitarian crisis for the people, for the community. If we want to really establish a communication with the community, we need to demystify and simplify. We can't really go to the community in our language. There is a language, which we can share, which we can understand, which is our transactional medium, But when we go to the people, the common man out there, the citizens, then there is need to demystify and simplify. Now, if we take it further, supposing someone is standing behind me or behind you and wants to harm you, has got a pistol in his or her hand, what can you or I do, Nothing. Because God has not given any eyes to us at the back. So there is a risk, but we do not know about it. So we are prone to the impact of that risk, But supposing you were James Bond, or I was James Bond, I'm sure all of us are familiar with James Bond. James Bond would have some kind of an alert system, either in his ring or watch or the spec somewhere here, and before the risk is there, he would be able to get an alert and immediately take the action and reduce the risk, mitigate or kill the risk, that is prevented. But then there can be situations when you are happy about someone is standing behind you with a pistol. Can you think of that? Suppose your grandchild is playing, and these days you get guns, which make as much noise, as much impact in a way, excepting hurting and killing, Then you are happy because your grandchild is happy, so you are happy, So the risk perception changes. But supposing the same boy or the girl, the grandchild, has got a real pistol in the hand, then the perception again changes. It is dangerous. If it is loaded, it's very, very, very dangerous. You are very careful. Come on. You are trying to, that even by mistake the trigger is not pressed. But if you are a police officer or you have a gun, you came back home, You kept it, in a hurry on a table, but it was empty. You know that. It's not a happy situation for a child to have a pistol in his or her hand. But you know that it is empty, so you are assured, you will say, ki chalo bhai, theek hai. So what I am saying is that, it is very important to understand the risk. I've taken a very simplified or in a very crude example, to illustrate the point, you see. That you need to understand. If you are sitting in Delhi, which is in zone 4 of seismicity, it is not enough just to say that, look, this place is earthquake prone. We need to know which zone. We need to know through micro-zoning, which kind of a place is this. Because 100 yards ahead, there may be liquefaction, this place may not have liquefaction, you see. So the mapping, the analysis, so understanding risk, as someone said in the previous session, in all its aspect is important. And we need to convey that in as simple a language as possible to the community, to really make it useful. After all, if the government is working, systems are working, companies are working, we are all working for that common man out there, you see. So that is my first message, you see. Someone talked of community engagement, very good. They are the first responders, usually we say that. But I also say with my experience in Bhuj and Super Cyclone in Orissa and many others, when I was Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, that community is not just the first responder. Community is also the last responder. It is the first responder because it is there, it has suffered, it has had the impact, it has to react immediately. That is the human nature, the human resilience comes into play. But then maybe 300 NGOs came in the aftermath of Bhuj earthquake. But they disappeared after maybe around 80, 90 days. 3 months and they all go back because they have done. But the story continues. The story of recovery, the story of reconstruction, the story of rehabilitation, they are all long stories. They are the stories of human resilience, you see. They are the stories of communities. They are the stories of families. They are the stories of women. I'd like to emphasize, they are the stories of women leadership, women-led, because they take care of the elderly, of children, of newborn, So that is also, these things are very, very important to see. So, we also have to look at these things, how in the humanitarian crisis, the corporate sector can come in. We have talked to BCM and BCP of corporate sector in the previous session. Very wonderful sessions, wonderful, presentations. But how do they, maybe after the Bhuj earthquake, Tata's came, Reliance came, many others came. But who came first of all? पहले तो बच्चे को दूध चाहिए, पहले तो घर में ब्रेड चाहिए, पहले तो जो घर में केले चाहिए उसी. Now, for those things, Tatas and Reliance and others did not come. They came for very big and laudable, noble objectives. But these small traders, who function out there, they also run the whole economy, local economy as well as the larger economy. They have got very, very important part to play. So how does BCP, BCM play for them? They have also been affected. They have not gone from Delhi. They are the local traders, the local thelewalas, local sabji wala, local doodh wala, etc., etc. So I think all these things are very, very important, So I'll just end, what my thoughts by one saying, Winston Churchill, we know Churchill, the former Prime Minister of UK, England, he said, never waste a crisis. I think that is one mool mantra in any disaster which we need to remember. Never waste a crisis. And we say, every disaster offers you an opportunity. Opportunity for what? Opportunity to build better, which was a slogan given by Build Back Better, was a slogan given by Bill Clinton in the aftermath of 2004 tsunami, when he was appointed as the special envoy of UN, to garner and mobilize funds. 20 countries have been affected by 2004, 26 December tsunami. As many as 20 countries, including India, across Asia, you see. Now, the kind of funding, the kind of mobilization, the kind of political will which was required across countries at the global level, in the UN system, and coordinated work, etc., etc. So Bill Clinton, he came up with this Build Back Better, you see. And recently, I'll end by this. I was really surprised and shocked by a statement of UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres. He said the era of global warming is over. We've been talking of global warming for 30 years. He said, era of global warming is here, is over. So what? He says the era of global boiling has started. That is how we connect the whole thing to the climate change and the kind of impasse where we have come. We have had all these COPs and COP28 right now. We know the kind of tussle, conflicts, negotiations, tough negotiations, round the clock, over the days and weeks have been going on. And yet happy solutions are not there. I am saying happy solutions. The solutions may be there, but is everyone happy? Is it really equitable? Is it really where everyone is willingly on one side taking responsibilities, on the other side taking, partnership, building partnerships? I think these are big questions which are there. So we need to look at this humanitarian crisis, early warning system and other things in all its dimensions. Early warning system also brings us to the last mile connectivity, very important dimension of last mile connectivity, and we'll discuss on that, you see. So, thank you once again, IASSM and my eminent colleagues here. Now, may I now hand over to Dr. Ranjit Kumar Sinha from Uttarakhand. He just handled a big global congress, and congratulations first of all on that. So, I invite your views on this subject. Thank you. Ranjit, please.
Thank you, sir. Respected Chair, panel members, audience. Humanitarian crisis during disaster is a big challenge for everyone, particularly administrators like us. Recently, we faced a lot of challenge in Uttarakhand. For example, Josimat crisis incident and then Silkyara tunnel incident. We all, as a team, managed it well. Altruistic behavior is very rare. It requires a lot of sacrifice. You see at any level, in household or community or at state level or national, international. But even if it's rare, whatever we have to make best out of the available altruistic behavior. But still, it's very, you can find a lot of altruistic behavior in communities. Disaster risk. Do we know the risk? As Sarah said, it is very important to know the risk. What are the risks? Do our engineers know the risk? Do our doctors know the risk? When I was in field, I find it very rare whether the engineer in front of me knows the risk, whatever he is building. Or our doctors, whatever they are doing in hospitals, they know the risk. And that is one problem which is causing a lot of issues in the field. When I joined this department in 2022, March I think, I thought it's a small challenge, not a big thing, as we used to react in the field. We will do this here also. But when I took a deep dive in this department, started to understand what does it mean, because not just relief and response, it includes mitigation, it includes risk reduction. And that took me a lot of time to understand the risk reduction and what are the risk, early warning, multi-hazard, EWS, impact-based, geo-referenced, and so on. So when I say how do we mitigate the risk, a lot of, if I talk about early warning system, which we are working on these days, because this is one area which you can, prevent damage of, lives and livelihood. This is very important because it involves both lives of the people and their livelihood, their properties, everything. And this is also important because, when you see the disaster management in a holistic manner, it's important because, if you don't do this comprehensively, a lot of people get left behind. And that is so damaging for the household as well as the community and the state. So nobody should be left behind. So that is why it is important to look this sector in a comprehensive and integrated manner, right from early warning to their rehabilitation, their financing, everything. Early warning system, when I say early warning system, providing geo-referenced and timely information to the stakeholders, whether it is community or administration or any targeted audience. When I say it's geo-referenced and timely, that means the information should be precise both in space and time. When I say information, what is this information? How do we get the information? We get information. Information is basically processed data. Whatever we get after analysis of data. How do we get this data? Data can be real-time data or can be a static data, updated as static data. And how do we get this real-time data? Real-time data, we get real-time data through satellite, through sensors in the field, through AWLR or sensor in the river. A lot of things are available in the field which we get data from. And that data is also not, is of no use unless we process the data. So do we have the facility to process the data, to analyze the data? Okay, we have the information after analysis of all the data available with us. But, does that data gives any clue what kind of damage an incident can cause? And that comes from modeling. And do we have the services of modeling available in our state or in our country? Last, few days back, I started a kind of collaboration of all the Himalayan states. I called upon a meeting, online meeting of all the Himalayan states, and we discussed about whether we do have, information system available with us. Do we have the models available with us? Information precise both in time and space made available to us. Everybody agreed to the question. We don't have precise information both in space and in time. I asked about IMD and asked about other agencies who are doing modeling in India. And it was, to my surprise, we have around more than 2,000 observatories, weather observatories, automated weather, stations and all. Sir. And we are using data only from 400 observatories. That means around 1,600, more than 1,600 observatory data are not being fed into the modeling. And that is so, I mean, it was surprising to me. Why, a lot of issues they discussed, why are we not able to feed the data from all the observatories available to us. So, this modeling is very important. And impact, what kind of damage an incident can cause. When I discussing about, risk, flood management in Uttarakhand, I asked my irrigation department, do we have all the information about river system and, our flood-prone areas, vulnerable areas? We do not have. We do not have information of all the rivers in Uttarakhand. That requires comprehensive study of river morphology. And then ask, do we have digital elevation model of flood-prone areas or vulnerable areas? No, we don't. We have, we are doing the elevation DEM of only 5-kilometer range of a particular river, and that too very limited number of rivers. So, and I also asked about, do we have the historical data available to us? Very few. I mean, historical data not available. In that scenario, creating models is challenging, but doable. And when we talk about, when we say doable, that requires a lot of technology, to be used to create models. And unless we have models, then it is very difficult to have impact-based early warning system. So here we have geo-reference and timely information we need, and on another side we should have models with us. Then only we can create, we can have geo-reference, timely, impact-based, multi-hazard early warning system. And that is why I'm trying to do in Uttarakhand, because providing information to stakeholders is very important way to save lives. And as I always say, it is worth spending money on preventing, saving lives of people. Now I stop here. I like my panel members to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranjit, for bringing some hard facts, on the ground onto this table of discussion. Keep in view the time constraints. May I now turn over to my friend Sanjay Sharma ji. Children are, it's need not say, they are very, very important. They are at the center of the whole thing. They are the leaders of tomorrow. So how do we really attend to look after the interests of the children? They are most vulnerable also for various reasons, physically, mentally, psychologically, otherwise in various disaster times. Now, Bal Raksha Bharat has been working for years together, taking various initiatives, and we'll hear from Sanjay how does it really connect with the humanitarian crisis. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And a very good evening to all of you. So probably I am the second last speaker for today. Thank you for your patience also. So basically, I belong to an organization which has 105 years experience, like global experience to work on the emergency preparedness, emergency response, issues like the stakeholder engagement, issues like working with the community on the disaster risk reduction. And we are so in terms of other than the emergency programs, a lot of development programs also we run in this country. But the motto, the objective is that we are the first respondent in case of any any disaster in the country, any emergency in the country. Also, like, with the development programs also, the focus is that, like, how the child safeguarding, how the issue related to community security and safety, all those issues can be included into the program, whether the program is related to education or the program is related to health or the program is related to the protection. So far in India, from last 15 years, like, we have responded to more than 20, emergency programs. And with our development programs also, like as Sir said, like, this is a child right organization. And we have reached to somewhere around 5,000 schools, Anganwadi centers and community with the disaster preparedness, working with those community on the disaster planning, all those issues. So since we are an implementing organization, I would mostly like to talk about our experiences, like, what we saw at the ground level, what kind of program we have implemented, what kind of challenges we have faced, and also, like, some of the suggestions also, like, what came out, after implementing all those programs, to put all those things here also on the table. To should I close it? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Can you please confirm if you can hear me from the back? Thank you so much. Thank you. So I just want to, like, share two examples and, like, that also show, like, the kind of challenges and journey. So the first example, like, which is working on the school safety, children's safety into the school, which we started in Rajasthan. And later on, this has been, adopted by many state governments in a different form. So this was, like, technical support to the Social Justice and Empowerment Department. And this happened from 2017 to 2019. And if you remember, like, there was a time somewhere in 2018 where, like, there was a lot of media talks about the safety of the children into the schools and how the schools can be made, like, a safe place for the children. And there was, like, some incident happened in the NCR region, and a lot of, like, discussion was happening around those issues. So with the government of Rajasthan, this initiative has started. And we try to understand, like, what are the key issues, like, what are the problems actually, like, which is holding back children's security into the school, safety into school. And then when we started, like, this further digging up the things, we found that, like, there's multiple issues. It's a very complex kind of a, like, the problem. So the problem starts from the top. So if you see, like, at the top level, there are multiple guidelines available on the, the children's safety into the school. So some were issued by the CBSE, another was the NCRT, the third one is, like, with the NCPCR, there's another guideline, another directive which Honorable Court has issued. So multiple guidelines, but most of the guidelines were talking about more or less the same thing. But the problem was the language, as Sir was mentioning, like, we need to simplify everything. So all those guidelines, like, mostly written into very high level, fancy kind of, like, language, mostly in terms of the legal kind of, like, the language, like, So that was one. The another challenge was, like, that, guidelines were very comprehensive. So talking is, starting from the infrastructure to, some behavior change kind of initiative. Now you imagine a poor principal, like, running a small school, government or private school. For him, it's very difficult. One is to understand those guidelines, what exactly those guidelines were talking about. And secondly, like, having that capacity to address all, like, long list of the issues, like, infrastructure, behavioral issues, like, the transportation issues, like, the pedagogy related, all those issues. So that was, like, the first problem from where this has started. Then the another thing which we found is that there is no regulatory mechanism, about the children's safety and security in the school. So imagine, like, in a district, like, there are thousands of schools, and for a poor district collector, like, it is really difficult to, see that whether all the schools are following those guidelines, like, the monitoring is little weak, like. And so that was another challenge. And the third challenge which we found is that generally, like, the children's safety in school is considered the responsibility of the principal, of the school only. So other stakeholders were missing in all those kind of discussion. So we started this pilot, and then, like, initially we started by, engaging all the possible stakeholders who have any concern or interest related to the children's security into the school. So department has formed a group of experts, but they also engage everyone. So including the people who the vendor who run canteen into the school, who provide stationery into the school, like those who run the transportation service into the school, the support staff, the teachers, the parents, every stakeholders, parent-teacher association, every stakeholder was consulted during this process. And finally, they came out with a very self-regulatory kind of a framework guideline. So a very simple guideline, which you simply run through those guidelines, and then you will come to know what are the risk area particular to your school. And what we also found is that schools were also very interested, especially the private schools, because that gives some kind of a say reputation to the school. When you say on a certain guideline your school is achieving 90% or 80% kind of rank, which provide assurance to the parent that the children are safe and secure in those schools. So these guidelines were further adopted by the government, and the Governor of Rajasthan, he issued those self-regulatory checklists by the name of Jaipur Declaration. Further, this has been tested to more than 10,000 schools into the state. The another beauty of these guidelines were that this was, so generally what happened when you come for any kind of review, so somehow this become a threatening kind of a process. So what the process was very simple, it's a 3-day process. On day 1, the team discuss about these guidelines with the children, with the parents, with the school teachers. On day 2, it's a joint review kind of a thing, where everyone go together and try to identify what are the risk area. And day 3 is the action planning, what need to be done at the immediate, intermediate, and then the final level. So this is how this pilot has run, but this gave lot of learning to us. So one, as sir was telling, so all the guidelines, whatever we are developing, those guidelines need to be very simple. The second, those guidelines should basically speak to the language of the implementer who is going to implement that. The second thing is that the process need to be very inclusive. Look, so imagine if you are doing the school safety audit and the children are not engaged into that, so then there's no sense of doing that audit. So all the stakeholders should engage, then they'll own it. I'll quickly narrate the another, the example. So this is during the COVID period. And during the COVID period, the many state government, they came out with the COVID task force kind of a thing. So that time we worked with more than 1,000 population panchayats, to train these task force on the developing the COVID action plan, protection plan for the village. And then we asked them, other than the panchayat members, you please engage the youths, as many youths as possible from your panchayat. And then we started developing a comprehensive plan. So the plan was having the multiple elements, how we'll do, the awareness about, the COVID, how we'll talk about the protection from the prevention from the COVID. If we need somebody to quarantine, what place we'll use in the village for the quarantine facilities. What should be the referral mechanism for the the community? What we'll do for the people who live below the poverty line, to provide them food, to provide them other services. If the vaccination need to start, how we'll prioritize the vaccination in our village. So all those things were the part of that plan. And we were really amazed to see, we go with a very small kind of a format. But when we started sitting with the community, so many important suggestions has, came out. And then we found every village was having a unique kind of a plan, looking into their expertise, they further develop it. So this is this again, form up our belief that you give power in the hand of the community. So your role, our role is just to navigate that, just to empower them. And then the rest of the things, they are the intelligent people. They know what is good for them, and they find the way for them. So this was another example, So basically, all of these experiments, there are many, I can talk more and more, but I'll stop here. I know the time is limited. But the 3 things we learned, out of all these experiences. So one is, that you really need to, build the capacity at the grassroots level, and especially the capacity those who are the implementer, who are the doer at the grassroots level. If you really want some disaster risk reduction, if you want to develop some, some kind of a mechanism, you need to do that. The second thing we learn is that, we should do a holistic planning. So imagine, we are talking about the security and we just talk about the fire security and we forget all other kind of security. So then there is no security. So whatever we need to do, that should be comprehensive, that should be holistic, and taking one element and, leaving the other element, I think that will not serve purpose in case of the, the emergency planning. And then the third thing, which is the most important, and that is the partnership. I think the partnership is the strength. The kind of population we have in our country, the kind of outreach we want to do, the kind of problems we have. I don't think any single organization can do that. The kind of excellent support which we got from the government, the support which we got from the academicians, the support which we got from the panchayat, that has turned out into this massive result. So I think partnership is the key, and I'm really thankful for ISM, for organizing this workshop. I see, all the major stakeholders, who have some voice, some concern, some work related to disaster risk reduction, climate change in this country, they are under one roof today. And so thank you for this deliberation. I really look forward. We like to work more with the ISM. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjay Sharma ji, for bringing the importance of children and what are the issues, behavioral, safety, emotional. And then the most important, in the processes like school audits and all that, involvement of children themselves. If we keep them away, then the process really remains incomplete. That's a big message which I take, from what you have said. May I now, move to Mr. Blikberg. You have been working with the UN system, you have worked with the recovery processes and all that. So let us hear from you, how do you see the humanitarian crisis and the international system?
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me okay. It's a pleasure to be...
Please move the mic a little bit closer to you.
Move it closer. Such a distinguished panel. I'll try to add a few points from an international perspective. Just a few days ago, the UN launched a global humanitarian appeal. It was the largest ever. It requests more than $51 billion, that's billion dollars, to help more than 340 million people who are in need of humanitarian assistance. More than 340 million people. This tells us it's the biggest appeal ever. It tells us that the global humanitarian system is in the process of being overwhelmed. The needs have been growing dramatically in recent years. The drivers are several. One is a number of quite large, intractable conflicts around the world that are covered heavily in the news, but also climate change and climate-related disasters are proliferating around the world. And together, it is really overwhelming the humanitarian system. With that in mind, we don't really have a choice but to start focusing more on how to reduce vulnerability, how to reduce risk, and ultimately reduce need. The chairperson mentioned the Sendai framework, and the Sendai framework is trying to say that the traditional response, disaster response, is extremely important, but it's not enough. We need to add on another component and move from just responding to crisis to really preventing risk, managing risk, and building resilience. So it's moving from a more reactive mode to a more proactive disaster risk management mode. The framework was launched 2015. It's a 15-year plan. We are about halfway through. We have just gone through a midterm review. What the review showed is that globally we're making some progress, particularly when it comes to reducing mortality from disasters. However, we are not making good progress in terms of reducing the number of people being affected, the economic losses to the private sector, but also to the public sector and society at large. Also disruption to services and infrastructure remain very high. At the same time, we see some progress on international cooperation and also some limited progress on early warning, because early warning is really a critical area of work if we are to reduce disaster risk and reduce the number of people who ultimately need assistance. I think another speaker, or maybe several, mentioned the last mile as an extremely important component of early warning. Last year, the UN Secretary General launched a global initiative on early warning. It's called Early Warnings for All. It's very ambitious. It aims to provide or to ensure that everywhere, everybody around the world have access to an early warning system within the next 5 years. It's too early to say if we manage that completely. It's very ambitious, but that's what we're trying to do with increase in funding from a number of sources, including the World Bank, the Green Climate Fund, and a number of bilateral and international donors. So this is a high priority for the UN system and a high priority globally as well. Reflecting a bit on disaster response, it is clear that the first or the initial responders are always local. And if it's a small disaster, the response may remain a local. But once it reaches a certain size, there may be a need for more national response, and in some cases an international response or international assistance coming on top of that. That means that disasters are complicated, complex. It takes a lot of coordination in order to do them well. And I think around the world, there's one very common component in terms of coordination of disaster response, and that is the importance of information, the importance of data and good flow of information and data. And this then becomes important in terms of preparedness as well, making sure that communication channels are agreed before disaster happens, making sure that roles and responsibilities are clear before disaster happens. Also making sure, whenever possible, that financing can be pre-positioned before disaster happens. There's a lot that can take place before disaster happens in order to save time and thus to save lives as well. Because in a disaster response, time matters a lot, and it means saving time means saving lives in many cases. Now, the private sector has a lot to contribute throughout, I would say, the disaster cycle. Among the areas where the private sector has really great expertise is communication, I would say, messaging, education. So it means in order to reach people with messages, in order to educate the people before disaster happens, the private sector can really partner with the public sector and the UN in some cases in order to make headway. Likewise, in an emergency response, the private sector can have a lot to contribute in various sectors, but also in terms of good management, project management. I think we in the UN have a lot to learn from the private sector just in terms of management skills. So I would say we see the private sector as a partner throughout, from risk reduction, preparedness, and to response as well. So those are some points that I can add to what the previous speakers have mentioned. I very much agree on the need to safeguard children, and also the importance of educating children on disasters and on risk, because they are tomorrow's leaders. So it pays off today, but it will also pay off tomorrow if we educate the children well in terms of the, natural hazards, in terms of disasters, and response as well. And maybe a final thought is that drills, evacuation drills, disaster response drills are very important as well, because we often in the UN, but maybe in the public sector, maybe even private sector, we are good at pulling together plans, but not always so good at implementing them at times of crisis. So I would say practicing together, doing exercises together on how we will respond in a disaster situation becomes essential in order to do it well when it matters most. So thank you, and back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blikberg, for bringing some international perspective, the international, the scenario, the data, $50 billion, 340 million, and the whole crucial issue of vulnerabilities, you see. What I liked was managing risk to building resilience, Now, keeping view the time management, I think it's just about 10 minutes to 8. We should be closing another 5 to 6 minutes, isn't it? I thought the session was just about 45 minutes. So let me put one question to each of the panelists. One, Ranjit, which I like to understand is how do we involve in terms of the humanitarian crisis? What do you see is the role of the local entities, local people's organizations like Panchayati Raj institutions, urban local bodies, the municipalities, etc. Because they are the community organizations. So how do we do that? Some thoughts on that.
Thank you, sir. When we see the status of our local bodies in India, sir, it's in terms of awareness about disaster and its risk and how it is to be managed. The awareness is quite low, sir. That is one challenge I am facing in Uttarakhand. In that sense, and over a period of time, what we have done, we have replaced the role of community with a state disaster response force and other, institutions. And that is also kind of, instead of empowering them, these initiatives are disempowering them. They have become more dependent on us. In my view, sir, to empower local bodies, both urban and rural, what we need to do is more sensitization, more capacity building in terms of both knowledge, information, equipments, training, everything. That is what is required. And they should feel part of the system, not, rather than being kind of recipient. The feeling of being recipient has to go away. And we must make them feel they are part of the system. They are the institution, they are the people who has to do everything. We have to involve them at every stage of, disaster management, right from early warning to rehabilitation. But that is one sector where we need involvement of all, agencies, all departments. Presently, what is happening, sir? Panchayati Raj department kind of working in isolation. Urban development is also working. The collaboration is missing. What I'm trying to do in Uttarakhand, I'm trying to bring everyone on one platform, trying to empower them, and I'm also asking their feedback, their suggestions, what is to be done, and unless the people's representatives come forward, demand, the initiatives from us, and feel part of the system, it is going to be a difficult, very challenging, sir.
Thank you, Ranjit. Now, Sanjay Sharma ji, you talked about children. Now, thinking of this early warning system and the vulnerabilities of the children, how do we? You have some suggestions. How do we reach the early warning system to children, to the schools, so that they are not left, they are not totally dependent on the others.
Yes, thank you. So I think that, for any disaster, children are the most affected. You see, when when disaster happened, yeah. So when disaster happened, immediately schools are closed, all the institutes are closed, children are either at home or at the, shelter homes. So they are the most affected and nobody care much about them. So I think the first and most important thing which we can do is that including all these disaster preparedness issues into their curriculum. So one of example we have, with the government of Andhra Pradesh, we introduced a separate curriculum on the disaster risk reduction for the class of 8th and class of 11th. And this has reached to 80,000 schools. And what I saw, in many state governments and at the national level also, this disaster risk reduction is now becoming the part of the curriculum. So I strongly recommend, all these issues should be the part of the curriculum. And then in schools also, there should be, we have several kind of clubs in the schools, like safety clubs, cyber security clubs. I think, there should be a club, or maybe, this issue should be merged with the existing activities into the schools. And we should definitely do the mock drills into the schools.
Thank you, Sanjay. Now, Mr. Blikberg, see, you talked of private sector. Recently, UNDRR has come up with this initiative of ARISE, ARISE. What kind of a role do you see for ARISE in India, what kind of initiatives? Do you have some suggestions, views on that?
I think so the private sector has really a role to play in disaster risk reduction.
I think
I have to take it
closer here.
I hope you can hear me now. So ARISE is a global alliance of a global partnership of businesses engaged in disaster risk reduction. It has chapters in various countries, including in India. We found that in terms of advocacy, what works best is if business people advocate with their peers. That UN officials, they may be active in advocacy, but when it comes to convincing the private sector to do the right thing, it's more effective if the message comes from the private sector itself, from their peers. So I see a big role for ARISE in advocacy. They also have a big role in sharing good practice, because a number of companies are doing great things on disaster risk reduction in terms of protecting their supply chain, protecting their employees, their operations, and in some cases their clients as well, and their communities. So there's good practice emerging in the private sector, and we have to share it to inspire more action. So ARISE has a key role to play, I would say, also in sharing good practice. We, in UNDRR, recently organized a seminar where we brought together members of ARISE from India, the Philippines, and Japan to share good practice, not just within the country, but across borders. And I see a good role as well for ARISE there with sharing ideas and also having frank discussions about some of the challenges for businesses when it comes to disasters, also across borders. And then I think finally, ARISE can also play a role, I would say, as a building, in terms of building bridges between the private sector and other parts of society, be it the UN, be it civil society, academia, or government. So ARISE often knows the private sector very well. They have private sector members. NGOs, UN are trying to engage with the private sector, but we don't always know how. We don't always speak the right language or use the right terms, have the right contacts. So I see ARISE as a very good bridge builder between the private sector and other parts of society. Because when it comes to disasters, we're really all in the same boat in the end. We're all involved, we're all affected to one degree or another. So it means also, in terms of taking action, we all have to be involved as well. So, in response to your question, I think ARISE can be useful in all of those ways, and probably many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blikberg, for some very good suggestions. Now, keeping you the time, I won't like to delay any further. I'm not really summarizing. Many important things have been said. I'm sure they have been taken note of. Let me close by sharing two slogans which we learned and tried to practice during, working close with the people. One is, आपदा नहीं हो भारी यदि पूरी हो तैयारी. A disaster will not cost you much if you are well prepared, you have anticipated, if you have done your BCP, BCM, mapping, analysis, etc., all that. The second is, विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत से बचाए और विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत न बन जाए. Development, thank you. Development should be such which protects you from a disaster, and development should not be such which becomes a disaster itself. And every day we are saying this, There is a delicate balance which has to be struck between the process of development and the possibility of disasters, because hazards are all over there. I'm not going into the examples, I'm sure all of you know, but this is something which we learned while working. I learned, with my team and others working in Bihar. You see, in the Bihar State Disaster Management Authority, विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत से बचाए और विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत न बन जाए. This is about resilience, this is about long-term sustainable development, whatever we say, you see. So thanks to all the eminent panel members, Mr. Blikberg, with the international experience, Mr. Sanjay Sharma, this focus on children, who are one of the most vulnerable sections of the society, my friend Ranjit, who is young, IAS, dynamic officer, handling very, very great responsibilities. And once again, thanks to IASSM, a special thanks to R.K. Sinha ji. Namaskar.
Well, thank you so much. We thank our distinguished panel for unraveling the challenges and complexities of crisis planning and suggesting comprehensive, collaborative and holistic solutions to meet the problem. I request Shri Rajan Bedkarji, DG IISSM, to kindly present mementos to our eminent speakers.